My name is Lillian Barrett. I'm 64 years old, a retired literature teacher, and the third generation living in this old white house, tucked between two quiet lakes in rural New Hampshire. People in town still remember when I used to host book clubs on the porch and bake rhubarb pie for the harvest fair. That life feels like a postcard now, sun-faded, a little too peaceful to be real. That afternoon, the smell of steeping lavender tea wrapped around the kitchen like memory. I had just set the scones on the table, Claire's favorite, lemon zest with a sugar glaze, when the front gate clicked shut behind her. She didn't knock, just opened the door, stepped inside, and stood in the hallway like someone bracing for impact. Her eyes were swollen. No mascara, no lipstick, just grief, and a jacket that didn't belong to the cold. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice hoarse like she hadn't slept. "It's about Chelsea and Victor." I didn't flinch. Not right away. Just turned and poured her tea, one sugar cube, no milk, the way she liked it last Easter. We hadn't been close, Claire, my daughter-in-law's older sister, always kept to herself during family gatherings, polite but distant. So when she sat down without touching the tea, I knew something was wrong. She looked me in the eye then, and I saw it. Not just worry, guilt. The kind that leaks through your skin. "I saw them," she said quietly. "Together. Chelsea and your husband. They were holding hands in the parking lot near Haskell's Cafe, and I don't think it was the first time." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Not until she added, with a whisper like glass breaking, "She's been bragging about it. To me. How she played Jason. How she married into your family on purpose." I set down my cup without a sound. The kitchen clock ticked once, twice. "Does Victor know you came to me?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "Neither of them do." I stood slowly, walked to the back window, and looked out at the frozen garden. The roses would bloom again in spring. But this was something else. "Then don't say a word to anyone," I said, calm and certain. "Not yet." Claire's voice wavered. "Lillian, what are you going to do?" I turned to her, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to clarity. "I'm going to smile, pour wine at Sunday dinner, and let them believe I'm the fool." That evening, I set the table for two, like I always did. Cloth napkins folded just so, the good silverware polished last Sunday. Victor was upstairs, changing out of his office clothes, humming off-key through the bathroom door like he had no idea his life had just been cracked open. I moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, but inside, something had shifted. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't hitch. If anything, I was too still, like the eye of a storm waiting to spin. He came down 10 minutes later, freshly shaved, smiling like he'd just closed a good deal. "Smells amazing," he said, sliding into his seat as I ladled chicken stew into his bowl. "I used thyme this time," I replied lightly. "You always said it reminded you of your mother's recipe." He nodded, took a bite, then glanced at his phone. Again, and again. He must have checked it 10 times before dessert. I watched him, silent, cataloging every twitch in his jaw, the slight smudge of lipstick on his collar he thought I couldn't see. Not Chelsea's shade, hers was always that too bold coral that made her look older than she was. Later that night, as he lay beside me with his back turned, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above us. I remembered the Claire who walked into my kitchen with shaking hands, and the Chelsea who'd once hugged me on Christmas morning like she meant it. And I made my first decision. I would not confront them. Not yet. I would wait, learn, document, smile when needed. Because this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. This was a war for my family's name, and I intended to win. Sunday dinner had always been my ritual. Roast beef, buttered peas, warm cornbread from scratch. Jason brought the wine, Chelsea brought the flowers she always said were just a little something, and Victor brought his best version of domestic charm. That evening, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Chelsea swept into the house like she owned the air. Her hug was tighter than usual, her earrings too flashy for a family meal. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Smells divine, Lillian," before flitting toward the kitchen like a butterfly with blades for wings. Jason followed behind her, his smile easy, oblivious. He handed me a bottle of red and asked if I needed help setting the table. I told him no, gently, and watched as Chelsea positioned herself at the kitchen island, legs crossed, chin lifted, like a woman about to pitch a business deal. "Actually," she said, sipping the wine I poured, "I was hoping we could chat for a moment. Just the two of us." I dried my hands on a towel. "Of course." She leaned in, lowering her voice with faux concern. "I've been a little worried about you and Victor. There's this distance lately, and I know marriage can get tricky at your age." I blinked once, slowly. "We're fine, Chelsea." Her lips curled. "Just saying. Sometimes people stay in something too long because they think they're supposed to. But maybe letting go is the best gift you can give each other." I smiled, as if touched. "That's a thoughtful sentiment. I didn't say what I wanted to, that letting go wouldn't be a gift. It would be a weapon. And I wasn't ready to use it just yet." 3 days after that Sunday dinner, I drove myself into the city. I told Victor I had an appointment for physical therapy. He didn't ask why. I doubt he even heard me. His phone had buzzed just before I left. I could guess who was on the other end. The law office was tucked above a faux restaurant on a quiet corner of Chinatown. No marble, no glass elevators, just creaky stairs and a brass nameplate that read, "Veronica Hoyne, Esquire, Estate and Asset Protection." She greeted me with steady eyes and a handshake that didn't try to charm. In her mid-40s, sharp blouse, short nails, and a quiet confidence that told me she didn't bluff. I sat across from her and laid out my story. Not all of it, just enough to see how the law might look at betrayal. She listened without interrupting, then reached for the thick manila envelope I'd brought copies of the original trust from my grandfather. The house, the lake cabin, 2 rental properties in Concord. All of it placed in a multi-generational trust meant to protect family assets from external dissolution. Veronica read in silence, then looked up. "Does your husband know this clause exists?" I shook my head. "He assumes everything gets split down the middle." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "It won't. Not if infidelity can be proven and you're the innocent party. This trust holds firm. If he's cheated, he loses any legal claim." A slow heat stirred in my chest. Not joy, not revenge. Clarity. I hadn't come to burn bridges, but I was ready to learn how to block every exit they thought they had. On Thursday, I left a tiny voice recorder inside the drawer of our buffet cabinet. It was the one closest to the dining room where Victor and Chelsea always found excuses to linger after meals. I placed a linen napkin over it, just enough to muffle, not enough to block. That night, we had roast pork. Jason couldn't make it something about a late meeting, so it was just the 3 of us. Chelsea arrived in a silk blouse, far too delicate for casual family dinner. Her perfume hit me before she even stepped through the door. Victor stood a little too close when he helped her with her coat. She laughed too hard at something he said about my mashed potatoes. I played my part. Served dinner. Complimented her necklace. Poured wine with a steady hand. And then I left them in the dining room to check on the apple tart. Instead, I stood in the hallway out of view, heart still, breath shallow, and let the recorder do its work. Their voices dropped to whispers, but I caught pieces. "We need to be careful," she said. Victor. "She doesn't know." Chelsea. "You're sure?" Victor. "She's just tired, worn down. She won't fight this." Chelsea laughed. 60 days, right? Then we're free." I didn't finish the tart. I sat on the kitchen stool staring at the countertop while their voices faded back into harmless pleasantries. They thought they were invisible. They thought I was deaf, blind, slow with grief. But I had every word now, every lie carved into digital permanence. Later that night, I downloaded the file and backed it up to a flash drive. I labeled it carefully, D. C. Dining Room, the 8th of February, 7:42 p.m. It was the first move on a quiet scoreboard they didn't even know existed. The next time Chelsea came over, she brought a pie. Store-bought, still in the plastic container from the bakery 2 towns over. She held it like it was a peace offering, but her eyes gave her away too bright, too rehearsed. We sat on the porch. March wind crept through the railings, and I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. She crossed her legs, smoothing her skirt with that same careful grace she always used when trying to look delicate. "I've been thinking," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "about you, about how much you've given to this family." I didn't answer. "And I know things haven't been easy lately, between you and Victor." Still, I said nothing. Just sipped my tea, let her fill the silence. I want what's best for everyone," she went on. "For Jason, for you. And maybe that means reimagining what happiness looks like, separately." I raised an eyebrow. She leaned forward. "What if you let go? Of the house, of the marriage? You deserve to be free, Lillian, to start fresh, somewhere peaceful." I nodded slowly, let the words hang in the air. "A condo," she added. "Somewhere near the river. Quiet, safe, easier to manage." "Do you think Victor would visit me?" I asked, soft as breath. She blinked, hesitated. "I'm sure he would," she lied. I stood, dusting crumbs off my lap. "You're very kind to be concerned." Chelsea smiled, mistaking that for surrender. But I wasn't breaking down. I was baiting her in. She thought she was leading me to the edge of a cliff. What she didn't know was I'd already memorized every stone on the path down, and I was laying traps along the way. Victor insisted on handling the logistics. "This needs to be simple," he said, over breakfast one morning, pretending to butter toast while avoiding my eyes. "Dignified. We don't need drama." I nodded, biting into a grapefruit wedge. "Of course." He scheduled the meeting with his attorney, a man named Alden Perry who wore too much cologne and smiled like a country club secret. Their firm was in a high-rise in Concord leather chairs, skyline views, framed golf photos on the wall. Chelsea came too. Of course she did. She wasn't subtle anymore. She perched beside Jason at the far end of the table like a grieving daughter, whispering comfort while holding his hand. Victor sat across from me, every bit the respectable man doing what's best for everyone. He didn't know I had already filed separate documentation through Veronica quietly, 3 days prior. Perry handed me a thick folder. "Standard division of assets," he said. "Given Mr. Barrett's role as primary provider and your mutual desire to keep this amicable." I flipped through the pages. He offered me the riverfront condo, half of one joint savings account, and a monthly payment that wouldn't cover utilities in February. The house? His. The family business? His. The cabin? The Concord rentals? Omitted. I looked up, calm. "And the trust assets?" Perry blinked. "Trust?" I smiled faintly. "Never mind." I signed what they needed me to sign on their papers. But I never said I hadn't already filed my own. And I certainly didn't tell them Veronica had stamped a sealed affidavit, backed by the clause they conveniently forgot existed. Chelsea looked radiant when we walked out of that building. Victor looked relieved. And I looked like a woman walking away with nothing. But I wasn't walking away at all. I was positioning. It was a Tuesday when Jason showed up at my door, pale and shaking like someone had carved the floor out from under him. He didn't ring the bell, just opened the front door like he used to when he was 15 and forgot his house key. His breath caught when he saw me standing in the kitchen, tea towel in hand. "She lied to me," he said, voice hoarse. "Chelsea, all of it." I said nothing, just nodded for him to sit. He collapsed onto the bench at the table, burying his face in his hands. "Claire sent me screenshots, texts, emails. They've been planning this for months, since before Dad even mentioned divorce. She said I was convenient." The words hung in the air like dust. "I checked her phone while she was in the shower," he added, voice breaking. "She didn't even try to hide it. She told someone she'd marry her way into the trust. I set the towel down slowly. My fingers brushed the counter just long enough to steady me. "Did you confront her?" I asked. He laughed bitterly. "I threw her out. Told her to leave before I called the police. She just shrugged. Said soon she wouldn't need me or this house. Said she'd be moving somewhere better." I met his eyes for the first time. "She meant this house," I said quietly. Jason's voice cracked. "How are you not screaming right now? How are you not falling apart?" I walked to the bench and placed my hand over his. "Because I knew," I said gently. "I've known for weeks." His lips parted. "You let her play this long?" "I let her think she was winning." Jason came back the next morning with a shoebox tucked under his arm. The flaps were bulging, the lid barely held in place by a cracked rubber band. "She kept this hidden in the back of her closet," he said, setting it on the kitchen table, "behind the luggage we never used." Inside were folders, password-protected USBs, a manila envelope with my name scribbled on the corner, not in my handwriting. We opened it together. The first paper stopped my breath cold. A life insurance policy. On me. Signed 6 months ago. Beneficiary. Chelsea Wolfe Barrett. "She forged your signature," Jason whispered, his hands trembling. "I called the company. They have no audio file, no verification from you. Just digital paperwork." I stared at the page, the false curls of my name looping beneath a lie. Jason looked like he might be sick. "She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was preparing for you to disappear." We didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, I rose and walked to the phone. I dialed Veronica first, then Detective Shaw, the local officer I knew from church years ago, now working county fraud. By noon, Chelsea's file had grown teeth. "She wasn't reckless," I told Jason. "She was calculated, and that makes her dangerous." He nodded. "There's more," he said, lifting a smaller envelope. Inside were photocopies of my grandfather's original trust, annotated. With Chelsea's handwriting. "She's been studying the loopholes," Jason said. "Researching property law. Inheritance timing." I closed the box slowly. It was no longer a betrayal of love. It was an attempted heist with my life, and my legacy, as the prize. Claire showed up that evening, her coat still damp from the rain, eyes shadowed with something she hadn't said yet. Jason and I were sitting by the fireplace, the insurance file spread open between us like a wound we didn't know how to close. "There's something else," she said quietly, pulling a folded letter from her purse. "Something I should have told you weeks ago." She hesitated, then handed it to me. "I think Chelsea may have done this before." My fingers stiffened as I unfolded the page. It was an obituary. Eleanor Wolfe, age 73, died suddenly of cardiac arrest. 2 years ago. Claire and Chelsea's aunt. "She was healthy," Claire whispered. "A little high blood pressure. Nothing serious. Chelsea was helping her with meds. She was staying at Eleanor's house the week she died." I looked up, the edges of the letter softening in my vision. "She inherited the house," Claire went on, voice cracking. "And about 40,000 in savings." She barely cried. "Just started making renovation plans." Jason's knuckles whitened. "Did anyone investigate?" he asked. Claire nodded. "The coroner ruled it natural. But Detective Shaw says if we have a pattern, if we have evidence, now they can re-examine the file, possibly even exhume the body." My stomach turned. Not from fear, from rage. Cold, maternal rage. The kind that settled deep in your spine and made everything suddenly, painfully clear. "She's not just a liar," I said. "She's a predator." Jason looked at Claire, then back at me. "Then we can't let her near any of us again." "No," I said. "And we won't." Because now, this wasn't just personal. It was justice, past and present, waiting to be served. The moving truck rumbled up the driveway before noon, kicking gravel onto the rose beds I had just pruned last week. Victor's car followed behind, polished and smug like the man inside it. Chelsea stepped out first, heels sinking into the wet grass. She wore a white blouse and oversized sunglasses, hair pinned like she thought she was being photographed. Jason and Claire stood beside me on the porch. Neither of them moved. "Is this a joke?" Chelsea barked, waving toward the truck. "Where are the keys, Lillian? They're supposed to be ready." I stepped forward, stopping just short of the steps. "This house doesn't belong to you," I said calmly. She scoffed. "You signed the divorce settlement." "I did," I nodded. "But this house is held in a generational trust, one you tried to bypass, illegally." Victor moved beside her, his face tight. "We had a deal." "No," Jason said sharply, stepping down beside me. "You had a fantasy." Chelsea's voice cracked. "You can't do this. We're on the deed." Claire raised her phone. "Detective Shaw says otherwise. The county just froze the title. Pending investigation." That's when Chelsea snapped. "You think you've won, you old hag?" she shrieked. "I know things. I'll ruin all of you." My voice was quiet, like what happened to Eleanor. That stopped her. Victor turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" But Chelsea was already backing away, panic cracking through her mask. Jason's voice was steady. "Get off this property. You have 5 minutes before the police get here." Chelsea stood frozen, then spun on her heel and stormed toward the truck, dragging Victor behind her. As the truck pulled away, Claire whispered, "She never thought we'd fight back." I looked at the empty driveway and finally exhaled. She thought wrong. The formal charges came 2 weeks later. Chelsea Wolfe was arrested outside a nail salon in Nashua, still wearing the sunglasses she'd used to shield her shame. The indictment included insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crime. There was also a sealed file under review linked to Eleanor Wolfe's unexpected death. Victor wasn't handcuffed, but he was named as a knowing accomplice. His accounts were frozen. His retirement plan, as it turned out, would involve a long conversation with federal investigators. Detective Shaw called me himself. "She's not subtle," he said, "but she's smart. You stopped her just in time." I thanked him, then stood alone in my kitchen, staring out at the garden. The tulips were starting to bloom. Jason and Claire came by that night with dinner takeout from our old favorite place. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, just full, like something cracked had been slowly patched with steadier hands. "She's gone," Jason said, as if saying it aloud might make it more real. I nodded. "But not forgotten. Not yet. Justice takes time." He leaned back in the chair, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "How did you stay so calm, Mom? Through all of it?" I reached for my teacup, warm in my hands. "Because I've lived long enough to know. Some storms aren't meant to be outrun. You stand still, you root down, and you wait until the wind breaks first." That Thanksgiving, the table was smaller, but the room felt fuller. Claire brought pumpkin bread still warm from the oven. Jason carved the turkey like his father used to, but slower, more careful, as if every slice meant something. I lit the candles in the good silver holders, my grandmother's, and poured wine without waiting for a toast. We didn't talk about Chelsea, not directly, but every laugh, every moment of quiet gratitude said what needed saying. "I keep thinking," Claire whispered as we rinsed dishes together, "what if we hadn't stopped her?" "You did," I said. "You spoke when silence was easier." She nodded, eyes glassy. "Do you ever wish things could have gone back to how they were?" "No," I said, "because now I see things as they really are, and that's better than pretending." She smiled through the sadness. "Then maybe this is our first honest holiday." I dried my hands and whispered back, "Maybe it's our first real one." A month later, I turned the upstairs apartment once meant for storage into something new. A haven. Just a simple space with fresh linens, a kettle, and a bookshelf full of secondhand paperbacks. A place where a woman could land when her world had collapsed, but she wasn't ready to call it over. Veronica helped me file the nonprofit paperwork. Jason installed a second lock. Claire painted the front door a warm blue. Chelsea thought she was taking everything from me. Instead, she gave me clarity. This house will stay in my family not because of a deed, but because of what it holds. Truth, strength, and the kind of love that doesn't ask you to shrink. Some evenings, I sit on the porch, watching the wind bend through the birches. I'm not waiting for anything anymore. The storm passed. The walls held. And this time, I built the foundation myself. What would you do if your daughter-in-law was having an affair with your husband and thought you were too naive to notice? This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a slow-burning, deeply emotional family drama that unfolds with chilling precision and unexpected strength. Told from the perspective of a 64-year-old woman, this narrative explores what happens when quiet patience meets calculated betrayal within a family's most sacred space: home. As layers of deceit unravel, long-buried truths emerge about loyalty, legacy, and what it means to reclaim your power without raising your voice. If you love stories about justice, emotional revenge, and generational resilience, this family drama will stay with you long after the final line. Watch until the end to discover how one woman turned heartbreak into healing, and how the most devastating secrets often hide behind polite smiles in the middle of a family dinner.